It's probably the toughest area to research that I'm aware of.
I suspect that they are going to try to represent themselves as our benefactors.
They're still masquerading as the saviors of humanity here from some other star system. It's a lie.
When looking at the UFO phenomenon, we have to remember the skeptics have to be right every time, but the believers only need to be right once.
This is the coming Great Deception.
This is ultra-dimensional, extra-dimensional, and quite possibly what the Bible describes as angels and demons.
These extraterrestrial vehicles are beginning to take a more hostile posture and are beginning to engage our military assets.
We're going to have official disclosure of the UFO alien presence. This is not fiction. It's coming.
If you talk publicly about an event after it happens, you're in competition with every other opinionated voice on the matter. But if you talk about an event before it happens, there's far less competition. In December of 2017, the New York Times ran a story officially confirming, for the first time ever, government research into UFOs through a secret Pentagon project called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. Not only was the existence of UFOs, now called UAPs, confirmed, but so also was the fact that the government has no idea what these objects are, only that they're in our airspace and are probably beyond anything human beings could manufacture.
I'm holding in my hands the Office of the Director of National Intelligence highly anticipated report, Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, which had everybody highly anticipating what that report might say. I do think there's some very interesting things that came out of this that are historic in the sense that our intelligence departments for the U.S. government are now admitting that the 147 cases of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, or more commonly known as UFOs, that have been witnessed by American jet pilots and military personnel on radar, sonar, that these devices are actually real. Now, what's interesting is that's the first time I know that the government has admitted that the phenomenon, commonly known as UFO, is real. It's not a figment of people's imaginations, and in most cases it's not swamp gas or some of the other kind of stuff that Project Blue Book and the Condon Report years ago did, which has always been thought of as a kind of cover-up for the UFO phenomenon. Now our government is telling us, yes, it's real, but we do not know what it is. In fact, they're saying at this point they can't even determine how this technology could operate. It breaks everything we know about physics, about aeronautics, and most of the lawmakers, congressmen that have viewed the full report, which the public has not been allowed to see, that also includes top secret information, are admitting that they highly doubt that this is China or Russia or somebody else that have somehow came into extraordinary, beyond physics capability of air flight. So what is it? Well, they are literally officially saying it's unexplained, and for the time being, unexplainable.
While this was a shock to those who are only vaguely interested in the topic, it didn't come as a surprise to others. There have actually been a number of individuals throughout the years expecting this exact event, the day we would begin to receive official government disclosure of UFOs. I remember as a child, the topic of UFOs and extraterrestrial life wasn't really discussed. I grew up in a Christian family, Baptist church, and the generally accepted view of UFOs in that community at that time was that these are just demonic, and that was about the extent of it. Growing up, I still held on to my curiosity, and years later I began hearing of Christian pastors, authors, and speakers that were discussing the UFO phenomenon more in depth. This eventually led me to Dr. Thomas Horn and his extremely influential book with Cris Putnam, Vatican, which deals with the UFO topic from a unique Christian perspective. A short while after that, I actually had the opportunity to work with Tom Horn at Skywatch TV and Defender Publishing. Throughout that time and continuing on into today, I've had the chance to personally ask experts in the field, both secular and Christian, what their opinion of the UFO phenomenon was. Now, this is just anecdotal, but when the topic of official disclosure came up, typically the secular experts would say something like, "We gotta push for it, but we don't know when it's going to happen." But the Christian ones, while there wasn't as much of an emphasis on putting pressure on the government for it, would typically say disclosure is going to happen and it's going to be very, very soon. We actually have some taped footage of some of these experts predicting this day of disclosure from around a decade ago. In fact, as far as I know today, the footage from these tapes contains the last surviving interviews from Chuck Missler, Noah Hutchings, and Cris Putnam, who have since passed away, but were all very well known on the Christian side of the UFO discussion years ago. Throughout the years before and after the huge success of Vatican, Tom Horn and his son Joe were planning to produce a documentary dealing with the UFO question.
All right, so it's a very simple question.
Okay.
What are UFOs?
They recorded all the interviews, but throughout the decade between then and now, new projects and developments in the world that required immediate focus kept coming up, as the UFO topic kind of seemed to die down a little. We always figured that we would end up using those tapes someday, but wanted to wait until the time was right. So here we are now, after the official beginning of disclosure, and it is absolutely the right time. As soon as I got the green light for this documentary, I began going through hours upon hours of footage and interviews from all those tapes. And on top of that, I wanted to conduct interviews with some of the same people, now a decade later, plus some new guests to get to the bottom of what's really happening with UFO disclosure, where it all started, and where it's headed in the future. To do this right, we really have to start at the beginning of this whole investigation, with Tom Horn and Cris Putnam traveling to Mount Graham to ask Vatican officials about their enormous infrared camera named L.U.C.I.F.E.R.
My interest in this phenomenon was first piqued during the 1970s through the 1990s when Monsignor Corrado Balducci, an exorcist, a theologian, and a member of the Vatican Curia, the governing body at Rome, and by the way, a guy who was a personal friend of the Pope's, started appearing on Italian national television to state that ETs were not only possible, but were already interacting with Earth, and that the Vatican's leaders were aware of it. Furthermore, speaking as an official demonologist, he actually said that the extraterrestrial encounters are real, that they are not demonic, he said. They are not due to psychological impairment or hallucinations, that they are not a case of entity attachment, but that those encounters, he said, deserve to be studied carefully. And then he went on to disclose how the Vatican itself has been closely following this phenomenon and quietly compiling material evidence, he said, from Vatican embassies around the world on the extraterrestrials and their mission. Whatever you make of his claims, Balducci was a member of a special group of consultants to the Vatican. He was a public spokesperson for Rome on the matter of extraterrestrial life as well as UFOs and abduction phenomenon, and his assertions have never been contradicted by the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Tom Horn and I went to Mount Graham to get to the bottom of what the Jesuits are doing up there. This is the question that everyone's asking.
Hi, this is Tom Horn. I'm here with my good friend Cris Putnam. We are at the base of Mount Graham in southeastern Arizona. We're going to be traveling from 3,000 feet up to 10,500 feet above sea level, through twists and turns up a very dangerous-looking road with no guardrails on it, and we are on our way to the VAT Observatory, the Vatican's Astronomical Technology Telescope, where we're going to be meeting with a Jesuit, and we're going to be talking to him about the Vatican's interest in the study of deep space, especially as it involves astrobiology. What else are we doing?
Well, I think that we're going to have a meeting with an engineer today who's going to explain to us some of the details of how the Large Binocular Telescope works, and particularly the details of the instrument they call Lucifer.
Yeah, it's actually called Lucifer.
It's called Lucifer, and it's used as an infrared gathering device, and I think it's very helpful when you're looking into deep space, trying to find Earth-like planets.
The Lucifer device has generated a lot of controversy from using a name that is classically associated with Satan. It's actually an infrared camera. There are some sorts of things that move around in the sky that can only be seen in the infrared spectrum. Perhaps they are looking for things that can't be seen in the normal light spectrum.
We were intrigued with Mount Graham because Arizona is quite famous for UFO activity phenomenon, witnessed by thousands of people across Nevada and Arizona, as well as the Mexican state of Sonora. The Phoenix Lights UFO, as an example, was the United States' actual largest mass sighting, not just because of the sheer number of witnesses, but because of the quality of their testimony. For instance, then acting Governor Fife Symington even testified in writing, quote, "Between 8 and 8:30 on the evening of March 13, 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I witnessed something that defied logic and challenged my reality. A massive, delta-shaped craft silently navigating over the Squaw Peak in the Phoenix Mountain Preserve. A solid structure. Rather than an apparition, it was dramatically large, with a distinctive leading edge embedded with lights as it traveled the Arizona skies. I still don't know what it was. As a pilot and as a former Air Force officer, I can say with certainty that this craft did not resemble any man-made object I had ever seen." Documented activity like that suggests something inherently strange about the area, begging the question, does Arizona host a dimensional portal? A wormhole? While extra-dimensionality is a possibility, needless to say, the Arizona area provides kind of a uniquely hospitable climate for the well-yoked marriage between Jesuits and extraterrestrials.
I think because of the Catholic system, because you have the mixture politically, syncretism, but their approach to reality is not just biblical alone. For them just to come out and say, we embrace this, they're there, they're real. I say they're real. I say they're really, really there. There's no question about that. The issue is what they are. When I don't see them in any way even suggest, hey, these could be really fallen ones, demonic, radically evil, bringing deception, when I don't see that in the discussion on their end, it's either they themselves are highly deceived, or is there internally acceptance? Have they engaged? Have they heard? Now we don't have just contactees. We have all over the world contactors that are looking to engage, looking, wanting. For anyone, even a Catholic priest or a Catholic astronomer, to say these are morally superior beings, we have to back up and ask the question, how would you know that? Obviously, they're revealing themselves as superior. They can outwit humanity, they can kidnap humanity, they can do sexual things to humanity. But tell us explicitly what you are, who you are, what you're made out of. And they're not giving us that.
My name is Timothy Alberino. I'm an author, an explorer, and a filmmaker. And I've been doing extensive research for the last decade into several topics, including the alien question and alien abductions. The Vatican is intensely interested in the alien question and have been for a long time, especially the Jesuits. The Jesuits are an order within the Catholic Church that are very powerful. They're comprised of a lot of scientists and intellectuals. This is one of the most prominent intellectual factions within Roman Catholicism. They're leading thinkers, and they publish a lot of papers, very well-respected intellectuals, especially as it relates to astronomy. They've been looking for life on exoplanets for a very long time. In fact, some of the leading astronomers in the world are Jesuits. The Vatican has been exploring the idea of extraterrestrial life as it pertains to theological questions. They've even, to some degree, acknowledged the UFO reality. And it appears that the Vatican is beginning to lay the theological foundation for the disclosure that, in fact, aliens exist, that extraterrestrial life, non-human sentient beings, are a reality. So they're crafting theology around this disclosure, around this revelation. It seems that the theology that's coming out of the Vatican regarding aliens is that the aliens are in fact superior to us, may in fact be presented as our saviors, as a morally superior race of entities from whom we must learn and are going to inform us to a greater degree regarding the biblical narrative and the theological questions of the Bible. And so the Vatican is kind of preparing the lay people out there for the arrival of extraterrestrials.
You see almost a parallelism between religion and science. Religion, which essentially espouses the idea of the superiority of man and does not necessarily adhere to the idea that man needs a redeemer, is trying to improve the human being through various religious practices. But then, having come to the knowledge that we are being visited by civilizations from beyond, the next logical step for them would be to welcome them as God's offering to us, a method of improving humanity, if you will. Science, exactly the same thing. Scientists who have given up the belief in God also have given up the belief in human sin and the need for a redeemer. And they are looking toward human self-improvement as well. So pseudoscience and pseudo-Christianity are both trying to improve the human being. And ironically, they're going to end up looking in the same place, that is, in the heavens, to these godlike creatures with perhaps millions of years advanced technology, whom they look to almost as gods, in whom they see the promise of human improvement. And I really think that's the common denominator. For example, the Roman Church, with all of its astronomical observations and statements about visitors here from beyond, is doing nothing more or less than saying, this is the method that God has chosen to improve humanity. He's sending us ambassadors from advanced civilizations, and these civilizations know more about spirituality, they know more about genetics, they know more about science, and so we are going to welcome them with open arms. And you know what? We're swallowing that hook, line, and sinker.
Perhaps the thing, though, that really caught my interest was Catholic theologian Father Malachi Martin, who, before his death in 1999, hinted at something like imminent extraterrestrial contact. When he was on Coast to Coast AM radio in 1997, Art Bell asked Malachi why the Vatican was heavily invested in the study of deep space at the Mount Graham Observatory in Arizona. As a retired professor of the Pontifical Biblical Institute, Malachi was uniquely qualified to hold secret information pertaining to what is called VAT, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. His answer at the time ignited a firestorm of interest among Christian and secular ufologists when he replied, because the mentality amongst those who are at the highest levels of Vatican administration and geopolitics know what's going on in space and what's approaching us, and that it could be of great importance in the next 5 to 10 years. Malachi's cryptic words, "what's approaching us could be of great importance," were followed in subsequent interviews with discussion of a mysterious sign in the sky that Malachi believed was approaching us from the north, he said. Now, that could have been an oblique reference to an end-time portent known as the Catholic prophecy of the Great Comet. People familiar with Malachi believe that he may have been referring to a near-future arrival of that comet or of alien intelligence.
I suppose if you were going to try to find some inside information about why the Vatican is up on Mount Graham, then Malachi Martin would be qualified to comment on that, having been an advisor to 3 popes and an insider in Rome himself, a former Jesuit. He implied that the highest level of the Vatican in geopolitics were expecting something to arrive. Now, what they are expecting, he didn't really say. Could it be the arrival of an extraterrestrial spacecraft? Maybe. Perhaps the Vatican is expecting wormwood that's predicted in the book of Revelation. They also have a prophecy of a great comet that would forecast the end times. Perhaps they're watching for something like that. Nobody really knows, but I suspect that Malachi Martin's statement suggests that perhaps someone does expect something soon.
Now, here's an interesting note. When I asked Father Guy Consolmagno, the Pope's official astronomer, what he thought of Malachi's claims, he actually seemed to be miffed by Malachi, and he told me, he said, "I've heard stories about the late Malachi Martin which make me rather suspicious of statements that come from him. I was at the observatory in the 90s, and he never visited us nor had anything to do with us," end quote. That reaction seems consistent with how many other Catholic priests despised Malachi because of his willingness to disclose what Rome otherwise wanted buried, especially the satanic cabal within the Jesuit order that Malachi wrote about in his best-selling books.
Malachi Martin was a very influential Jesuit priest who specialized in demonology and exorcisms. He's a highly intelligent person. He could speak at least 7 languages. One of the things that he was famous for was talking about Fatima and kind of hinting and alluding to things regarding Fatima that people were unaware of. He discussed the revelations that he believed are forthcoming from the Vatican regarding Fatima, and also the fact that parts of the information has been withheld from the public, in his opinion, in his estimation, and revelations were forthcoming.
In 1917, over Fatima, Portugal, up to 70,000 people in a field saw a sphere in the sky that shot down a cascade of rainbow colors, what they call angel hair, which seems to be some kind of particulate matter that falls down to the ground. This is a UFO sighting. They don't know what this is. It's an unidentified flying object, and they're seeing a cascade of colors. They call it the miracle of the sun, but obviously the sun was not dancing in the sky. The gravitational forces would have flung the Earth outside of our solar system if the sun moved like that. No one else saw it outside of that area. If the sun had moved in the sky, the whole world would have been aware of it. Obviously, we have a UFO sighting that has created a great tradition in Catholicism, the miracle at Fatima. Now, of course, this gets associated with messages supposedly from the Virgin Mary. No one in that field heard Mary. This was all channeled through a 10-year-old child.
The Catholic Church dressed this up in Catholic terms. It was, the kid said it was, she called herself a lady from heaven. This entity, whatever it was, held some sort of a globe in her hand, very small, it's about 3 or 4 feet tall. It wore a very short skirt above the knee. Women didn't dress like that, only prostitutes did. It communicated with the kids only telepathically. It showed them horrible visions of hell. It gave them supposedly 3 prophecies. Well, when you go back and we look at what the eyewitnesses say, they say over and over and over again, I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. A spinning silver disc, a dull disc. The word disc is used over and over again, and the reason for that is, in 1917, UFO and flying saucer are not part of the vernacular.
In 1950s, Pope Pius XII was thinking over promulgating a new Marian doctrine. This is called the doctrine of the Assumption, this idea that Mary was bodily ascended into heaven, perhaps like Jesus did in the beginning of the book of Acts. Now, as he was pondering whether or not he should promulgate this new doctrine, over the Vatican gardens, he sees an opaque sphere in the sky cascading a rainbow of colors, much like what was described at Fatima. He took this as a sign from heaven that he should promulgate this new Marian doctrine. So I think it's fair to say in a very real way that a UFO inspired an official Catholic doctrine that all Catholics are bound to believe in.
I believe that the Fatima apparition was a classic UFO sighting. What makes Fatima so unique is you had hundreds of people who witnessed this, simultaneously witnessed this sighting, almost as if it was intentional, almost as if there was a communication happening. This was an intentional encounter with what I think was a UFO phenomenon. But certainly the people who were gathered at Fatima observing this phenomenon were primarily Catholic, and they interpreted the encounter as some kind of a divine communication specifically related to Mary and the Fatima phenomenon.
I think there's a danger in viewing the Catholic Church as a monolithic entity with one purpose driving it. I think we'll probably see more than one motive driving their interest in life and space. The thing that's interesting about it is why is the Jesuit order even involved in astronomy in the first place? A lot of people are wondering, do they know something we don't know? I suspect that some of them do. I wouldn't be surprised if there haven't been perhaps even popes who have maybe believed that they had been in contact with extraterrestrials. There are some reasons that suggest that maybe that's the case. With the general Jesuit order, these scientists that are involved in astronomy, I think with them it's more of an intellectual issue. The sorts of things these scientists are doing are completely materialistic. They're looking for black holes, perhaps a parallel universe. Now, the Large Binocular Telescope makes no bones about their mission statement is to look for Earth-like planets. Belief in astrobiology that life is out in space is really the worldview of most scientists. So to be intellectually respectable, you need to be in line with what the rest of them are thinking. So I think it's almost a pride issue in some regard that they don't want to be seen as these obscurantist, creationist types that Christianity has been associated with in the past. So I think some of it is that it's kind of keeping up with the Joneses in the scientific community. And some of it perhaps is this idea that they want to position themselves to be the go-to religious authority if something does happen. So they really do have an astrobiological agenda. It's very transparent that they are looking for extraterrestrials. Quite interestingly, one of the technicians, when Tom and I were talking to them, Tom kind of threw up a scenario. Well, what if a UFO showed up? Would you guys divert your viewing time to move over to the UFO? And he sort of gave the impression that that was all so common that they wouldn't even be distracted by that because you could see a UFO anytime. I found that a little bit astounding that they just kind of brushed that aside as a common event. When you start to look at the history of the Mount Graham site, it gets a little more intriguing. This is an Indian holy ground. I really got the feeling I was in an enchanted forest of sorts. It's what they call a sky island ecosystem. It's very interesting just from that point of view. You go from being in a dry, arid desert into really a lush forest. You get the impression that you're in a special place. You do get a feeling of a spirit in that area. It's kind of a density to it. It does feel like something supernatural is operative up there.
Mount Graham is considered holy ground to the current Native American Apache tribal members from that area. Not only that, but there are several Native American legends from many different tribes that describe a time in the ancient past where otherworldly visitors interacted with mankind. It was these legends that caused Tom Horn to investigate if there was a connection to UFOs, aliens, and other supernatural events described in ancient texts such as the Bible.
So here we are, we're on the 6th day, the final leg of a journey. We've gone through the ancient Pueblo dwellings, we've met with Indian guides, with Cherokee guides. We just actually left a little while ago with a 3rd generation medicine man that took us inside of his dwelling, told us their stories of creation and the amazing parallels between the Old Testament legends of giants and the stories here in America. Giants that have been here in the United States. Now we're on our way to the petroglyphs. There are some strange images that are there. There are pictures of 6-fingered and 6-toed giants that were painted by the ancient Anasazi. And we're going to film it. We're going to present it to you. And it's been a blast, 6 days and running, and now we're just about finished. Following my initial investigation into the Vatican's interest in aliens and our trip to Mount Graham, in media interviews following, we were literally inundated by requests from thousands of people worldwide asking that we continue that research, especially as it involves stories from around the world of specific geographic locations, very often tied to mountains, where intelligent beings have been reported for thousands of years traversing portals, stargates, wormholes.
The Anasazi, very mysterious culture. Why would they need to build things, 40, 50 feet up in the air? Why did they suddenly vanish and no one really knows what happens to them?
They were very mysterious because they appeared to have had some advanced knowledge regarding astronomical phenomena, and also they disappeared. They suddenly disappeared from the earth.
We had been told of the more than 4,000 archaeological sites, 600 cliff dwellings ascribed to the Anasazi, a mysterious people that had kept no written records, and yet who built mesa-top villages and absolutely astonishing cliff dwellings within caves and under outcroppings in the sides of these canyons. Nothing could have prepared us for how breathtaking they actually were. Just ahead of us that day stood an outstanding complex that some archaeologists say was built long before the time of Christ and that had suddenly and mysteriously been abandoned at least 800 years ago. Clothing, tools, and even food items were included in the materials that they had quickly left behind.
The prevailing theory is that the Anasazi migrated away from where they were inhabiting the United States and eventually integrated into other native tribes, and that's what happened. But the evidence seems to suggest that this was not a gradual migration and integration into other tribes. Rather, this was a sudden disappearance because they left behind many of the artifacts that would have been very important to their society, such as bags of salt, baby carrying devices, and all kinds of practical implements that they surely would have taken with them if this was an intentional and gradual migration out of the area. Maybe what happened was they were confronted with some kind of an existential threat that caused them to suddenly flee and disband their society, or that perhaps exterminated them or devoured them.
This one location alone was a small city, 3 stories high, built right inside a sheer mountain wall, yet more than 600 other such cliff dwellings lay ahead of us. Now, these components were built into the high rock ledges along the Mesa Verde Valley, and they were constructed from really accurately cut stones that were set in mortar. Even after 800 years of abandonment, the walls remain remarkably strong to this day. You can also see the handholds and the footholds that were cut into the cliff faces that served as frightening climbing apparatus, which the inhabitants would scale along these sheer mountain walls in order to tend their gardens on the top of the mesa, where they grew beans, squash, and corn. Well, hour after hour, as we advanced to study these structures, we couldn't help but wonder why the Anasazi would have ascended such terribly dangerous circumstances to carve out such amazing fortresses. What they did was far beyond the need to provide for shelter and protection from cougars and bears. It would have been 1,000 times easier to construct and defend their lodgings near the river from which the stones had been harvested, unless, of course, they were trying to defend themselves from something more dangerous than rival tribes, bears, and large cats. All we could imagine was that this tremendous amount of additional effort had something to do with the need for a literal citadel of fantastic defensible proportions. But from what? We believe that we found the incredible and scary answer to that question later when viewing and deciphering the ancient petroglyphs that the Anasazi left behind.
We're here at Newspaper Rock, which is an etching done on sandstone during ancient times. It covers about 2,000 years worth of human history, etched into stone on this behind us. Notice the giant footprint at the top with the 6 toes on it. And notice up top, this creature that has almost horn-like things on it. Is it holding a disc? Something beside it to the left? If you look around through here, there are lots of designs that repeat themselves. But then if you look around, there are also some isolated things that are interesting to look at as well.
So we decided to make one final excursion, this time into Utah, 50 miles north of Moab, where one of the largest known collections of petroglyphs is located in San Juan County. The storyboard that we would visit there is etched in sandstone. It began as early as 1,000 years before Christ, and it records practically every element contained in the ancient world, from spiral vortices and those who come through them, to human-animal chimeras and even giant 6-fingered and 6-toed footprints in pursuit of much smaller 5-fingered and 5-toed humans. It's called the Newspaper Rock petroglyph, and this one is known and is somewhat decipherable as to which images are older due to the fading and darkness of the earlier depictions, which are certainly the most mysterious with their alien-looking heads and suits and what might be some type of craft. And archaeologists believe the writing on that Great Wall continued from about 1,000 years before Christ up until about AD 1300, the same time the Anasazi suddenly disappeared. But the Natural Park sign that is there admits, quote, "There are no known methods of dating rock art. In interpreting the figures on the rock, scholars are undecided as to their meaning or to have yet to decipher them. Unfortunately, we do not know if the figures represent storytelling, doodling, hunting magic, clan symbols, ancient graffiti, or something else," end quote. Well, I suggest something else is exactly what they tell us, based on the redundancy of the same story told all around the world.
There seem to be depictions of very strange entities, non-human entities, in the petroglyphs in the desert Southwest and other parts of the United States. Petroglyphs that were created a long time ago by Native American tribes. Some of the petroglyphs seem to depict like Bigfoot-type creatures. What were they really trying to depict in these petroglyphs? Nobody really knows. Sometimes these entities that are being depicted in the petroglyphs might be shamans dressed up in certain kinds of suits, because they definitely would shroud themselves in buffalo skins and purposely make themselves look non-human, like monsters or mythological creatures, sometimes celebrating what they believe was contact with non-human entities that occurred in the distant past with their ancestors. And so a lot of this can be traced back to these ancestral memories and these ancestral traditions of contact with non-human entities, whether those be star people or whatever. And I think that they probably are depicting this in some of their petroglyphs.
The large reptilian figure behind me was one that we were told earlier today by a third-generation medicine man had represented an entity that had caused Indians to go crazy, causing them to wander to the point of insanity.
Dr. Don Mose, Jr., a third-generation medicine man that we met with for a large part of a day during this investigation, told us that the oldest legends of the Anasazi, which had been told by his great-grandfather to him, who likewise had been told by his ancestors, included stories of the Anasazi turning to sorcery, sacrifice, and cannibalism after they, quote, lost their way, end quote, and were driven insane by a reptilian creature, which they depict with a halo above his head. Images of that being are included in the petroglyphs that we filmed inside the canyons, and I believe that they likely attest to the fallen reptile or reptiles of biblical fame, which also misled humanity.
Concerning the days of Noah and the Watchers, who were, of course, angelic beings, there was a time when there was marriage between the angelic beings and women here on earth. We read that in several places, not only in the Bible, but Plato mentions the fact that the gods lived in Atlantis, of course, or wherever Atlantis was. Plato and other sources, including Josephus, agreed angels of God came down and cohabited with women and had children with them. They were called Nephilim. That's one reason why God had to destroy the world with a flood in the days of Noah.
Genesis 6 is this strange, very brief story in the Bible that says that sons of God saw that the daughters of man were fair and took wives of any they chose, and from these unions of these sons of God and daughters of man produced giants, or Nephilim in the Hebrew. What that means is, talking about this now from a UFO standpoint, is that we've got biblical documentation that Earth has been visited by inhuman entities for literally thousands of years.
The enticing linkage that suggests itself, there may be a close relationship between what we see as UFOs and what occurred in Genesis chapter 6, where fallen angels, these are angels bent on mischief, somehow got themselves involved with human women to create a hybrid called a Nephilim. In the Hebrew, it's called the fallen ones, the verb nephal. In the Greek, it's jigas, which means the earthborn. Those events is what gave rise to the subsequent mythology about Greek demigods and all of that. These creatures were the cause of the flood of Noah. His genealogy wasn't impaired by this chicanery of the fallen angels. The word tamim in the Hebrew, it refers to a physical defect. He was free of that, his genealogy was. So we know a lot about that because of the passages both in Genesis 6 and it's confirmed 2 or 3 times in the New Testament. What many people overlook, it happened a second time when God communicated to Abraham that his descendants after 400 years would come back to this land. That gave Satan the opportunity at 400 years to lay down a minefield, and the same kind of activity occurred again a second time. And the Genesis 6 record even makes mention of that. In Genesis 6 verse 4, it says it was also after that. Now, it makes allusion to a second occurrence. It's amazing. Many people don't really understand the Old Testament because they don't understand what really happened in Genesis 6. It's important. It all ties together.
Dr. Don Mose is known to be sensitive to Christianity, a retired Navajo academic who had authored many of the nation's school books as well as cultural programs throughout the Four Corners area. And as we would discover, he is a proficient Native American storyteller, an oral traditions historian, if you will. He seemed pleased to meet us, more than eager to get started, telling the tales that we had asked him to clarify for us, stories that his father and grandfather had passed down for generations, stories of giants, stories of alien-slaying heroes of lore, and more.
What Grandpa was telling me was not folk tales, but it was real.
Now, the official and legendary stories involved creation.
Well, this means beginning of life cycle from above, and also Mother Earth. This means Father Sky.
Giants.
Their mother was very protective. She hid them away from the giant. When they're just very small children, she hid them underneath the fireplace and put a stone there and she would hide them. So their name was raised under fire, under the fire.
A reptilian deceiver, and more, all from the voice of the nation's medicine man.
Here we are in the Four Corner. We finally made it here. The old group came from here. By the time that we have arrived, the old Anasazi people were gone, but they left the handprints, the sign. Yeah. I think what they did was trying to find the center of the earth.
Dr. Mose even sang to us in the antiquated tongue and recited parts of what I would call Old Testament history, paralleled in their earliest antiquity using the Navajo language. When I pushed him for greater detail, Dr. Mose went off script. He actually delineated from the official Navajo storyline to provide greater consistency between history and the way the Bible itself recorded certain events. For example, as the medicine man was following the official storyline about the Anasazi and how they didn't disappear but rather migrated and became the modern Pueblo Indians, I expressed doubts about that theory. And he responded by looking at me and grinning and saying, "Well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but..."
They took what was spiritual and they began to use it to their own gain. They used the spirituality to develop witchcraft.
The Anasazi did?
Yeah, the Anasazi. They began to destroy their culture. They didn't have respect for what was sacred. A lot of what is sacred, the sand painting, is supposed to be only done in the morning before the sun goes down. It has to be destroyed, never to be shown again. But today, we take pictures of it, we do imitation of it, hang them on the wall. That's what the Anasazi would do. They took what was sacred in those kiva. I don't know if I should say this on camera, but they also became cannibals. It's the old same Sodom and Gomorrah story. The destruction, you see, it's no different, but we were aware of that.
There was a time, he said, when the earth was infested with such great giants and alien gods that destroyed and ate the people. Some of them were in human form. Others were monsters and human-animal hybrids. And he then proceeded to tell us the older stories that his grandfather had repeated about these mysterious people actually disappearing after they came under mind control from a reptile with a halo, a carnivorous creature suspiciously similar to what we described in Exo Vaticana as fiery seraphim.
In the ancient Near East, it was a common story that a warrior god had to defeat and subdue a chaos monster, a chaos dragon, who emerged from the primordial abyss, or the sea. In the Bible, in fact, the sea, especially in the Old Testament, is often a representation of chaos, the domain of Leviathan, which was the Hebrew version of this chaos dragon. That entity was described as a seven-headed serpent. 2,500 years before John wrote the book of Revelation and described a seven-headed serpent emerging from the sea as the Antichrist, and a seven-headed dragon, red dragon, identified as Satan being cast out of heaven. Mesopotamians knew of a warrior god who had to destroy a seven-headed serpent in order to bring the natural world into being. The Greeks saw it as the conflict between Zeus and Typhon. Even the Scandinavians, the Norse, had their story of Thor and Jormungandr. So this was a common story in the ancient world. It's been told and retold with different names over many times. The bottom line is this: creation began with a primordial sea representing chaos. As we see in the Bible, Genesis 1 verse 2, God was hovering over the deep, and that word is Tehom in Hebrew, which is a cognate, same word, different language, for the Sumerian Tiamat. God basically subduing chaos, Tiamat, and saying, down, stay. And then we see other descriptions of God defeating Leviathan in the Bible. In Isaiah 27, there's a reference to that day, which is a reference to the day of the Lord, the day in Revelation that ends with Armageddon, when God is pouring out his judgment on an unrepentant world. In that day, he will destroy Leviathan, the twisting serpent, the fleeing serpent. What's curious about this is that there is a thread of magic, and that's magic with a K on the end, because it derives from Aleister Crowley and his Ptolemaic system of magic that was further developed by his personal secretary, Kenneth Grant, who sort of took it and developed it into something that he called the Typhonian tradition, a reference to this old chaos god of the Greeks, Typhon, because according to Grant, he detected in Crowley's magical system a set Sirius current, Sirius, S-I-R-I-U-S, reference to the star Sirius. Set being the Egyptian chaos god who was identified by the Greeks with Typhon. He developed this system into the Typhonian OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, developing further what Aleister Crowley had developed. This occult system is essentially the foundation of chaos magic. Believing that there is a spirit of chaos out there in the vicinity of Sirius that is coming this way, and that they need to develop a system to somehow control it. Now, think about how ridiculous that is. That is absolutely an oxymoron, developing a system of chaos. By definition, chaos is random. There is no system of chaos, and yet these practitioners of this system believe that they can somehow box it in and control it, and then they'll rule the world or something. But that is not coincidentally connected to the UFO phenomenon and the alien contact phenomenon, because the leading organizations trying to make contact with extraterrestrial intelligences, SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and Dr. Stephen Greer's organization, CSETI, which is the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, both named SETI, which is the name of the pharaoh who preceded Ramses the Great, Ramses' father. SETI means man of Set, man of the chaos god. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. It's probably fine.
Is it possible that these otherworldly beings, whatever they are, manifested in a certain way in our ancient past, but today are manifesting differently? People across the world have reported horrifying personal experiences with these entities. Today, these experiences are collectively referred to as the alien abduction phenomenon. Are these experiences purely physical, or is there something more to it? Hey, Carl, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking my call, brother.
Oh, it's my honor, Josh. Thanks for having me.
You're a very well-known pastor here in America. You've written several best-selling books. So talking about the alien abduction phenomena, what do you make of that? Is this demon attacks? Is this hallucinations? Are these actual aliens abducting people? What do you make of the whole alien abduction phenomenon? When Tim was here, he had a different idea that they might not be demons. I don't know if you're familiar with how he talks about it, but what response would you have to that theory?
Parallels between that and current UFO lore seems to be very similar,
Yes.
which might then be suggestive that both the phenomenon is real and that it's been going on for a very long period of time.
Is there anything within either alien abduction scenarios or the UFO sighting scenarios where something like higher dimensions would be a better conclusion to draw rather than extraterrestrials from other planets?
In my book, demons and fallen angels are two different entities. Demons are the disembodied spirits of a Nephilim destroyed in the flood. That's what demons are. They are earthbound. Fallen angels are fallen angels, part of the heavenly host that was created and rebelled against the Most High God. There's a word called metaschismatisai in the Greek. And we know that from the Bible, Satan can appear as an angel of light. So he's able to metaschismatisai, change his appearance and look however he wants, male, female, whatever. The symbol of Baphomet is a perfect example. It's a chimera, it's a woman, it's a man, it's a goat. What is it? I would propose to you that Baphomet is the spirit of the age. Baphomet, that's where we are. Terrifying.
The alien abduction question probably really came into the public focus with the Betty and Barney Hill case. This was a couple, they were musicians, they were traveling home from a gig, and they described being pulled over in their car with a flying saucer. They got out to see it, and then they kind of had a blackout and wake up with kind of vague memories of being aboard a flying saucer. Now, that was the first big case. There were some interesting elements about that really do seem to have evidence supporting that it really happened. Now, since then, there's just been a multitude of cases. People claiming to be abducted out of their beds at night, out of their cars, from all sorts of different situations. There's a question of, is this really physically happening, or is this a dream, or is this some kind of vision? There seems to be some of both going on, but some of the cases that I've examined, the spouses or significant others report that the person is actually physically missing. So I don't think we can explain it all away as visionary. The fact that something very real is going on has been confirmed by quite a few researchers. Probably one of the most prominent would have been Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, who really risked his career to study this, and Harvard even put him up for review over this. He had to defend himself, and he was exonerated. He determined that there was a very real phenomenon going on. The extent that it's physical or spiritual, is debatable, but I think the fact that it's real is undeniable.
Oh, I'm sure that the phenomenon has been going on for a long time, since the Genesis account, and perhaps before that. There was a reason that the earth had become waste and void, but our pre-Genesis history is very sketchy. The modern UFO abduction phenomenon, I'm sure, has been around for generations. Now that we have such widespread knowledge exchange and internet, we hear about it more often. But I'm sure that there were a lot of people in the past who were abducted or who were exposed to this demonic stuff that never talked about it because they'd locked them up or chided by their peers.
I'm Nick Pope. I worked for the British government for 21 years at the Ministry of Defence, which is the UK's equivalent of the Department of Defence in the US. I was a civilian. I was there for 21 years, and for much of the early 90s, I was posted to a division where my duties included researching and investigating the UFO phenomenon, and my mission was to analyse the data and assess the defense implications of UFOs. Very few, maybe none, of these strange phenomena, whether it's UFOs or alien abductions, have a single cause. I suspect that when we talk about UFOs and alien abductions, multiple things are going on. Some of them prosaic in terms of the explanations. Other things may be anomalous. With UFOs, for example, one can say that a lot of it is misidentifications, aircraft lights, satellites, meteors, weather balloons, etc. Same thing with alien abduction, alien contact. Some of these experiences at the very extreme end of the spectrum will simply be fabricated. Other abduction experiences might be attributable to a combination of vivid dream, hallucination, things like that. Then you get to the anomalous end of the spectrum, and of course many believe alien abduction in the literal sense is simply extraterrestrials taking people against their will physically on board a nuts and bolts spaceship. And that's certainly one possible interpretation of the data, but there are other possible answers to this. Some take us to interesting territory like other dimensions, parallel universes, the whole spiritual realm. There are interesting parallels, for example, between the alien abduction experience and the shamanic experience, the shamanic journey. With shamans, they get into the shamanic state, however they do it, whether it's through dance or whether it's through taking various substances, hallucinogenics, and they enter this other realm. Some people who have no interest in UFOs or abductions have done this for themselves and gone into that same trance state, and they have accessed something. And it makes one wonder, is there another realm out there that can be accessed in a number of ways? Is it what modern science might call hidden dimensions, parallel universes, or is it something else, something that at present we have neither the words nor the concepts to understand or describe?
When we get down to the double or triple handfuls of what seem to be real brain twisters, like, all the tests you can run on these people have been run, and they seem to be sane and rational people, and they keep coming up with the same stories. That gets a little freakier to people. So let's just pretend like, for the sake of this conversation, that those are absolutely real, and that experience actually happened to these people. So then what's the explanation? I think it's demonic. I truly do not think it's actual physical humanoid type beings from other planets that have developed the technology and the curiosity to be so far more advanced than we are to come to us for the sole purpose of trashing the gospel of Jesus Christ and examining us sexually and messing with our minds and terrifying us. More than likely, biblically speaking and even scientifically speaking now, we are dealing with interdimensional experiences of some kind of an entity, and I would say an evil entity, and I would say that would be demonic.
Contrary to popular conception, aliens are not demons. I can say that unequivocally. We know what demons are within the biblical context. According to the Hebrew tradition, demons are the disembodied spirits that proceeded from the Nephilim when they died in the pre-flood age. The demon is a ravenous wraith. Its only desire is to inhabit a body of flesh through which it can interact with the material world. These entities were cursed to be bodiless wraiths that would wander the earth and would feel all of the desires of the flesh. They would be hungry, they would be thirsty, but they wouldn't be able to eat or drink or satisfy their fleshly desires. Every time that we encounter demons in the New Testament, for example, they are these savage, ravenous, foaming from the mouth entities. In the case of the Gadarene, who was demon-possessed, it was said of him that he would scream in the tombs and he would break his chains. He was a very ravenous person because he was demonized. There was a legion of demons inhabiting his body, his biology. They want to feel once more the fabric of the physical world from which they were banished. The manner, the disposition of the gray alien is totally antithetical to a demon in the traditional sense. I think that if we were to try and contrive the most unattractive body for a demon to inhabit, we couldn't do any better than a gray alien. The gray aliens are stoic. As far as we know, they don't eat or drink in the way that we do. They absorb nutrients, most likely. As far as we know, they do not have sexual organs. And their disposition is robotic. You have to imagine gray aliens abducting people and bringing them on board these alien craft. Sometimes there's hundreds of people laid out on tables, and the grays are kind of like the worker bees conducting the different procedures related to the abduction phenomenon, which are sexual in nature. So you have to imagine these little stoic gray aliens walking around among sometimes hundreds of naked bodies, incapacitated, laying on tables. Somehow we think that these are demons, or that they're flesh suits for demons and they're able to restrain themselves, and because again, all a demon wants to do is fulfill the lusts of the flesh. Basically, you would be trapped inside of this stoic little creature that doesn't even if you wanted to, you don't have the reproductive organs to even engage in the satiation of your sexual desires. You're literally in the most unattractive body you could possibly imagine if you're a demon. So I don't think that demons have anything whatsoever to do with gray aliens.
Fallen angels, again, can appear as angels of light. They're not going to go, hi, I'm a fallen angel and I'm here to kill you. They're going to lure you in. Every abductee I've ever talked to, they've always been told, right to the ego, they have a special purpose. They've been singled out. You have a very special mission. You must fulfill it. And meanwhile, they're wasting away to nothing. Literally. They're losing weight. They're not sleeping. They're obsessed with this thing, and that's how they lure you in. The demons that are disembodied and that possess people, that's a whole different deal, isn't it? They're foaming at the mouth and are absolutely crazy. So fallen angels that appear, they're not our friends either, don't misunderstand me. But they seem to have a different agenda or be able to present themselves in a way that is more palatable to humans, whereas the demonic is the demonic.
The Bible tells us there's the angelic realm, there's the demonic realm, there's power behind it. Satan is called the prince of the power of the air. There's technology behind it. There's some kind of terrible, terror-invoking deception. The Bible says that. I think those kinds of verses, studied in their context, may point to some type of a UFO disclosure. And a lot of ufologists who have spent decades believing that it was humanoid beings from other planets have now backed way off of that and have gone on public record saying, after all these years, we believe these are entities that have always been among us, probably interdimensional, probably malevolent. They have nothing good designed, and several of them, who I don't think are even believers after reading their biographies, say this phenomena we now believe is more in line with what the Christians would call demonic activity. So I think that's what we're dealing with, brother. I mean, I only know what I know, and everything I know that the scripture says and what modern science says, and then these people that have devoted their lives to studying this matter have said recently in writing and on film, I think we're dealing with interdimensional entities that mean no good to us. And the Bible would describe that as demonic activity.
If we take those things that are larger than us, larger than man's reach, and just lump that and call that the macrocosm, we suddenly are confronting astronomy, astrophysics, those kinds of things. The great discovery of 20th century science is that the universe is finite. It may be expanding, but it's finite. And that has staggering implications. That means it has a beginning, and it'll ultimately have an end. If we go the other way, looking at what's smaller than man, call that the microcosm, that gets even weirder, because you and I would think that if we took, say, a piece of string or something, and we cut it in half, we would take whatever we have left, cut it in half again. And at least, maybe not physically, but conceptually, you think whatever we have left, we can cut in half. It turns out, we discover, shockingly, that when you get 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, and you try to divide that, what we have there loses a property called locality. That observation has actually been proven in the laboratory. They actually demonstrated non-locality. Every photon in the universe somehow is directly connected to every other photon. That defies our normal thinking of space, if you will. What we call physical reality has a limit in smallness, whether it's length, mass, energy, or time. It's made up of units that you can't divide. So there's a limit to smallness. There's a limit to largeness. What we call physical reality is a digital simulation. There was an article in Scientific American, June of 2005, which was dealing primarily with the fact that constants in physics seem to be changing, but they make the observation that's profound, that if the constants of physics are changing, that implies that our physical reality is a shadow of a larger reality. And I was blown away when I first saw that, because that's exactly what the Bible's been saying all along.
Let's suppose we are dealing with intrusion. Think of it as a doorway, a gateway, a portal. Every door is basically a two-way affair. So if with UFOs and abductions, we are dealing with what you might call leakage or something coming through, then it works both ways. You can go into this realm and something can come out of this realm. And maybe that's an interesting way to think of the entire range of paranormal phenomena, that it's a sort of leakage from these other dimensions, these hidden worlds.
What contactees describe as extraterrestrials may fall into two categories: demonic entities that have been given physical form, and there are some who believe that the alien greys are meat suits that have been genetically created to give physicality to these spirits. That's the thing with demons. They cannot manifest physically in our world. In the case of the alien greys, it almost appears as though they were created for these suits. Now, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, definitely on that issue. I would suggest that some of the other entities that have been observed by contactees appear to be fallen angels, and they can manifest in our space domain. In the Bible, they're always described as humans. The book of Hebrews tells Christians that we can entertain angels unawares. The way they are described in the oldest Sumerian texts and iconography are very often theriomorphic. That means hybrid animal-human. And that's what we see in many of the accounts from contactees. Mantids, things that look like insectoids, if you will, or reptilians. Interestingly, the experiments by Dr. Rick Strassman with DMT, the so-called spirit molecule, with volunteers in Arizona, they encountered similar entities, things that looked like humanoid crocodiles who were not happy that the volunteers were entering their time-space domain. Is there some connection there between the spirit realm and what contactees are reporting? Yes, I think so. And I think that when we compare this with older descriptions from Sumer, Mesopotamia, of denizens of the spirit realm, bison men, scorpion men, fish men, I think there's something there. I think those who are being contacted are seeing both demons that have been enfleshed somehow and fallen angels.
We're not necessarily dealing with one straight explanation, one neat solution here. There may be several things going on. And for people who say, oh, this is all just science fiction, actually it's not. And very often things that maybe a few years ago might have been more sci-fi are now quite sciencey. Other Dimensions is a very good example of that. Some of the string theory, for example, needs the existence of these so-called hidden dimensions for the equations to actually work. And scientists, including the great theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, are actively looking for these hidden dimensions right now at places like the Large Hadron Collider in Europe. A spiritual or occult explanation of UFOs and abductions is quite possible, and one of the figures, I think, who's often overlooked in all of this is the great magician and occultist Aleister Crowley. One only has to look at that drawing, that famous image of Lamb, this entity that he says that he encountered. It's the archetypal image of an alien grey, really, or it's the prototype of an alien grey. So the idea that there are these entities that through magic, through witchcraft, through the occult, can be summoned or decide themselves to come through some sort of portal into our world. That's interesting, and one person's demon is another person's grey. It's all a question of language and perception. If you are asleep in your bed and you see a shadowy figure across the room, how you interpret that will depend on your belief system, your culture, your knowledge. So to some people it will be a ghost. To others it might be an angel or a manifestation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. To others, it might be demonic. To others, it might be extraterrestrial. But these are just our words and labels. The reality of these things may transcend all of that. There may be more fact to this than people realize.
It makes us wonder if these seemingly hostile entities are manufacturing and piloting the objects that we commonly refer to as UFOs or UAPs today. Or is it possible that the alien abduction phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon are two separate and different things entirely?
Back in 2013, my brother-in-law Tony and I decided to drive from Cleveland, Ohio, where we were, to the suburb of Brook Park, which was about a 15-minute drive, to go to a GNC store and buy some supplements for weight training. It was about 7 o'clock at night, and it was a very cold, very windy night. We were going to the strip mall, and it had a very large parking lot, and there's a GNC store there, and that's where we were headed. And as we were approaching the intersection where this strip mall was, we noticed this large craft hovering 20 feet above the corner store, and it wasn't moving, it was just hovering there, and it had very bright lights. The first thing we did was we rolled our windows down, because we thought we were going to hear the telltale sound of blades whipping through the air that you would hear if you're in close proximity to a helicopter. But when we rolled the windows down, we didn't hear anything. Silence. I entered the parking lot and immediately threw the car into park and cut the engine. It glided and positioned itself above and in front of my car so as to be completely visible through the windshield. It didn't have any propellers, it didn't have any exhaust or jets, it didn't have any kind of propulsion system to speak of. It had grayish-green angular body armor, typical of the F-117 Nighthawk, but it wasn't a stealth fighter. When I was looking at this thing, I had two distinct feelings that I couldn't shake and can't shake to this day. First, I knew that what I was looking at was reverse-engineered military hardware that had alien components incorporated into it. And I don't know how I knew it, I just knew it. And the second thing was this sensation that I was supposed to see it. I was supposed to be there, it was waiting for me, and when I arrived, it made sure to descend right over my car, right in front of my windshield so that I could get a good look at it. The craft suddenly lifted up higher in the sky, it turned on its axis very smoothly, and it just started to glide away.
As many already know, among the curious reports filling the news cycles lately, Senator Marco Rubio, who chairs the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, told CBS News that he hopes the advanced UFOs that have been filmed in our atmosphere in recent years, doing things that seem beyond our understanding of physics or technology, is the Chinese or Russians or some other adversary who perhaps have made some sort of technological leap that allows them to conduct that sort of activity, because the alternative, that they are alien craft or supernatural, would bother him a great deal more. On the heels of his testimony, the New York Times cited Harry Reid, the former Nevada senator who was instrumental in funding the original UFO research program, saying that he believes that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials from not of this world are now in our possession under top secret study.
I think there's elements of government that believe they are in contact with some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence. When I say elements of government, I say probably people in black projects, people in the military-industrial complex, or perhaps deep in the CIA. Not elected officials so much, not congressmen, probably not presidents. Perhaps people in the military that have lifelong careers. The more likely people that work for the big corporations that are on the payroll of black projects that we don't really know where all these billions of dollars go. I suspect that some of them probably do. There's been a few cases reported. Really, the original guy that I heard that story from was a Lutheran pastor, Ray Boucher, and I've been in contact with him. And he was contacted by these guys claiming to be the Collins elite. And when they contacted him, they really wanted expert advice on demonology. They were afraid that they let the genie out of the bottle, and they were really seeking advice on how to put it back. They tended to think that what they thought were extraterrestrials were demons. These were military guys. I think that some of them may believe they're extraterrestrials, some of them might believe that they're demons. I don't know, but the evidence is there that there's an element that's in contact with non-human entities.
Some may already know about the astonishing interview with Luis Elizondo, the former U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent and former employee of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, who headed up the government's investigation into UAPs or UFOs, who stated in a recent interview that people can watch on YouTube that the government's higher-ups believe UFOs are connected to biblical demons. He actually said that, which I confirmed, by the way, after contacting senior Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis for a comment, and he sent me a related excerpt from his new book, Give Me Liberty, Not Marxism, that confirmed Elizondo's commentary.
As a Christian, I would want to know whatever threat is out there, as much as we can know about it. So it's strange to hear about these groups claiming some kind of Christianity, saying that, well, let's just ignore it. There's rumors of a group here in the U.S. called the Collins Elite. They're a secret group in the U.S. government, from what stories are told about them, that are convinced these alien visitors are demons that are talked about in the Bible. Have you heard of specifically the Collins Elite? If so, do you have any knowledge as to what level of influence they may have over the general public relating to UFO disclosure?
I've heard people like former intelligence officer Lou Elizondo talk about some of the pushback he got at the Pentagon when he wanted to do more in terms of researching and investigating UFOs. And the pushback came not from a sort of hard-nosed scientific skepticism, it can't be, therefore it isn't, but it came from a faction within the Pentagon, perhaps within the wider intelligence community, that believed that the phenomenon was demonic. And I have come across similar things in the UK. There is a group. I have personal experience of coming up against this, and a lot of it has its roots in the Bible, in stories of fallen angels, and also in the book of Ephesians. And there's a particular passage there, Satan described as the prince of the power of the air. And because of that quote, a number of people in government, the military, the intelligence community have convinced themselves that UFOs are demonic. And their view, therefore, is if it is demonic, we should not be studying it. Because if you study it, if you look at it, you feed it, you give it energy. These people are saying, no, we should not be engaging with this because you are engaging with the devil, with demons.
The government is doing what it's always done when it comes to the UFO, UAP phenomenon, which is shape the narrative. It's very interesting to me that 2 weeks after our book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, was published in 2017, the New York Times ran a piece authored by Leslie Kean, who was a long-time true believer in the UFO phenomenon, about the Tic Tac UFO spotted by Lieutenant Commander David Fravor and other F-18 pilots from the USS Nimitz back in 2004. It was also spotted by radar operators on the USS Princeton, other naval craft that were taking part in the exercise that day. The USS Nimitz incident is well documented. Commander Fravor and his colleagues saw something. It's just we don't know what it is. They didn't know what it is either, but the way the narrative has been spun to us now, it's not of this earth. Okay, well, yeah, maybe. It is significant that the group that took the lead in bringing this information before the public was To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, a group headed up by Tom DeLonge, former guitarist, lead vocalist for the band Blink-182. He put together a team as part of this group, To the Stars Academy, that wanted to make cutting-edge technology available to the public, but also develop entertainment programs encouraging people to think more about what might lie beyond. When you looked at the board of directors of the To the Stars Academy, every single one of them, except for Mr. DeLonge, came right out of either the intelligence community or the military. They were connected somehow to the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, or some other three-letter agency, or right out of the Pentagon. That is not a coincidence. That's consistent with what we've seen for 70-plus years in the UFO phenomenon here in the United States. What's really curious is that the video that made such a splash in December of 2017 has been seen by practically everyone since then, had been available on YouTube since at least 2007. So for 10 years, that video was out there in the public domain, and yet it was no big deal until suddenly the New York Times kind of broke the wall of silence. And now, suddenly, over the last 4 or 5 years, it has become okay for the mainstream media to discuss this. We see this regularly as a topic on Fox News, especially MSNBC, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, USA Today. Mainstream news outlets are taking this seriously suddenly. And the question we have to ask is, number one, is the story true? Number two, who benefits if we believe it's true? Well, I think the story comes back to shaping what Americans, what the world thinks of this phenomenon. The idea is to convince us that we're being visited from someone out there. It hides the fact that we might be experimenting on craft that we don't want the Chinese and the Russians to know about, or perhaps that they're working on craft that we don't want the American public to know about because we don't have an answer for it. This thing is moving way faster than the fastest known craft in our arsenal, the SR-71 Blackbird. Secondly, to convince us that we are being visited by our space brothers who will very shortly reveal themselves to us and help us to evolve, to upgrade, to become humanity 2.0, to become as gods.
There are some very disturbing testimonies and accounts coming from UFO abductees about the collection of genetic material of ovum and sperm. People report seeing hybrid children. Women report being pregnant and having their babies taken away from them. Very, very disturbing statements. As far as physical evidence for these, it's really hard to pin it down from the abductees themselves. There is some that I think is suggestive. Now, a lot of the testimony is obtained from hypnosis, which has been seriously questioned by a lot of scholars, and some of it's hard to take at face value. Whether you think it's really happening, whether there's really a hybrid program or not, I can't say for sure whether that's really happening, but one thing I do know is that these entities, whether they're really doing it or not, they're perpetrating the idea that they are, and that's undeniable.
In my opinion, I have no problem with the fact that dark entities, immense in their abilities, have tried to take human substance, and the whole issue is to integrate themselves into humanity, making themselves acceptable as part of their agenda.
The offspring, the hybrids, the Nephilim of the past were giants. Apparently, what they're getting today, if that's what they're trying to do, are these 3-foot-high diminutive ones. So one of the conjectures by observers is that it would appear that they're trying to figure out why they're not getting what they used to get. If that's the case, one conjectures that the human genome may have degenerated. There used to be 1,000-year lifetimes back then. Today it's nominally 70, give or take, right? And so that may be somehow involved in this.
The women find themselves pregnant. 2 or 3 months after that pregnancy, the child is then taken, and they sometimes don't see that child, maybe 4 or 5 years later when they're re-abducted and asked to hold their child. And the earlier accounts of this, the child looked very sick, long, stringy, blondish white hair. Apparently now the hybrids look a lot more vigorous. We have reports of a man who was abducted and forced to have sex with a hybrid being, a woman, female. And the woman had longish, blondish white hair. And upon reawakening, he had the presence of mind to see that he had a hair on his body. And he took that hair, and we've tested that hair. And what we found with that era is just unbelievable. We feel it definitely correlates what happened in antiquity with what is happening now. The abduction phenomenon is very, very real.
Really good question is, what would be the purpose or what would be the end behind a breeding program? Well, to me, it's very similar to cattle breeding. Some you breed for milk, some for meat. You regard them as lower life forms to be used for your service and for your consumption. I think that's the way Satan regards human beings. Satan's minions, the transdimensional interlopers, have exactly that motive: to create a slave class of human being through genetic manipulation.
The Bible doesn't say in the last days there will be aliens that will be breeding with humans. But here's what Jesus said about the last days. It will be just like the days of Noah. We start with that scary little verse in Genesis 6 that said, and in those days, what days? The days of Noah. The sons of God came unto the daughters of men. That term comes from the Hebrew phrase, B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. Now it involves potential sexual involvement, and there would go to the breeding thing. At the very least, I think it means that there was something technological going on. What do we find in the UFO captivity phenomena? They say, well, I was probed and prodded and my sexual organs were examined, the birth canal, and I mean, you'll hear these things, and so I can kind of envision that Satan and the demonic realm that was in the process of this whole fallen creation since the garden, there was something about the birth process and the ability that humans have to create themselves that God gave to us. So when we get back to the Genesis account, it was either one of two things by the wording there. It says, because then they came unto them and had children by them. But could it have been technological? We think we invented test tube babies and CRISPR-Cas9 technologies. I don't think that the demonic realm has ever looked at these kinds of things and says, gee, we didn't know that could be done. And you remember what was Satan's temptation to Adam and Eve? You can be like us. Some translation says you can be like God. But in either way, Satan is saying, you can know all the stuff we know if you will sit down at my feet. You hear Jesus say it's going to be just like the days of Noah. So what does that mean? There's either going to be that happening again in the last days, and or it will be attached to some kind of technology wherein all flesh becomes corrupted again. That's what happened in Noah's day. And brother, we're the first generation since the days of Noah to see it happening again right before our eyes.
The quote-unquote UFO alien abduction phenomenon, in which people are routinely picked up, probed, and sampled, and there have been dozens of books and movies made about this. But the common denominator here is that genetic samples are taken. And many researchers have concluded, after much study, that these alien beings, in traveling in their alien machines, have the ability to capture and duplicate the human genome, and that they are very much in the business of creating a synthesized human being that can interact or intermesh with a normal human being. And why would they want to do this? Because they would want to insinuate themselves into our civilization, so that they can regulate it for their own purposes. This happened once before the flood, when the sons of God, that is fallen angels, came down to the daughters of men, and basically they created a hybridized false race for the purpose of controlling the race and controlling the planet. I believe they're doing exactly the same thing again, only this time they're not fallen angels, they are UFOnauts. They're just coming in a different guise.
The question of threat is interesting and complex. Threat equals capability times intent. And that's used in the military sometimes. One hears that from some of the people in Congress who have received classified briefings on this that the public hasn't seen. My view, and the view of people who've looked at this from within government, is better to assume that it's a threat and then be relieved if one doesn't materialize, than do it the other way round, assume everything's going to be fine and then get caught out if that's not the case. And I would take it further and say that anything with these capabilities in our airspace is in and of itself a potential threat.
So what's the main point? We now live in a world where official disclosure has begun, and the governments of the world are starting to focus on the UFO question. Now, whether our government is as uninformed about the topic as the general public, or if they know more than they're letting on, is really anyone's guess. Now, the purely human side of me says that this phenomenon might be a physical threat to our nation, or maybe even the world. And because of that, we absolutely need to funnel our resources into figuring out what this is. If not even for our own safety, then for the safety of our children who will inherit the world that we create for them.
Whether the government should be studying this phenomenon, I think from a secular point of view, definitely they have a responsibility, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the Air Force, the Navy, to try to analyze threat assessments that could involve phenomenon that, in their mind, might be advanced technology from an adversary like China or Russia. However, I do think that it's quite intriguing, as Luis Elizondo admitted, that members of the Pentagon, very senior officers, warned him not to pursue the study of this materialization because they had already determined that it is demonic and that it could be dangerous in supernatural ways to be putting oneself into contact with these entities. I mean, what could that possibly even mean? Are they suggesting that there could be retribution from the dark side if there's a danger of them being exposed through research by what? Christians that are in our Defense Department? It's all highly strange, but I think in a very secular sense, we have a responsibility to work in defense of our nation that would also include analyzing what the unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomenon, as they are more commonly called today, are experienced.
People ask about the nuclear aspect. This is very sensitive. There have been a number of cases where UFOs have flown directly over nuclear facilities and have adversely affected the ordnance. Basically, I've heard the term switched them off. You could argue that it's a demonstration of power and therefore a threat. And indeed, there was a case from Ukraine, 1982, I believe, where far from being switched off, after a UFO encounter directly over the base, missiles were put into their pre-launch sequence. This is a sensitive and highly classified area, and again, it's something I'd probably best not get too far into, but it's a disturbing aspect of this, and I hope that existing contingency plans for a whole range of nuclear scenarios can be adapted to the new reality if that's what we're dealing with.
My Christian side takes that a step further and says a spiritual threat could be far more dangerous than a physical one. A physical threat could destroy my body, but my spirit belongs to God. But a spiritual threat could cause both body and spirit to be destroyed through deception. Now, to me, that's even more reason that we should be trying to learn all we can about what's flying around in our skies. What I absolutely do not agree with is the idea that we should ignore it because it's demonic. We've tried ignoring it for decades and it hasn't gone away. If it is demonic, then it's an enemy and we should learn what we can about their tactics and their capabilities so we can defend against it. If it's not demonic and it's something purely physical, it would be completely irresponsible to allow it to continue breaching our airspace, interrupting our military exercises, and having free reign over our heads while we blindly trust that these completely unknown entities are going to be responsible and benevolent with whatever they're doing. So my hope is we as American citizens can learn to come together on this issue, with Christians allowed to voice suspicions and warnings to the public about possible spiritual threats, and our military and government informing the public about physical threats. Now, that might seem like an unrealistic thing to hope for, and maybe I'm being too optimistic here, but I say let's shoot for the stars, and if we only end up one step ahead of where we are now, well, that's still one step towards the physical and spiritual security of our nation and its citizens.
Well, even secular ufologists suspect demonic activity in the interaction between humans and aliens. And it's not just Luis Elizondo quoting top-level officers from the Pentagon. Whitley Strieber, author of Communion and other books on the subject, once wrote this, quote, "There are worse things than death, I suspected, and I was beginning to get the distinct impression that one of them had taken an interest in me. So far, the word demon had never been spoken among the scientists and doctors who were working with me, and why should it have been? We were beyond such things. We were a group of atheists and agnostics, far too sophisticated to be concerned with such archaic ideas as demons and angels."
So what are we to conclude, if anything, about the possible demonic connection to UFOs, UAPs, if there is one? There is no doubt that demons in the biblical sense could be producing UFO phenomenon in some cases, and they would be doing it for their own end times reasons.
The theology of transmogrification, where spirits take form. This is something that indicates ability by demons to manipulate energy and matter. For example, what about poltergeists, as they are known, and their unexplained noises? How else could spirits cause audible vibrations unless they have ability to make physical contact with tangible material? That being true, maybe demons produce the phenomenon known as unidentified flying objects by manipulating energy.
Now, there's a whole list of reasons why they might do that, including for the purposes of deceiving mankind. In fact, demons might be the driving force behind what's called in ufology the coming disclosure moment. Well, I do believe that there's a point coming at which time there's going to be a so-called official disclosure, but if demons are involved with that activity, what might be their purpose?
Well, that comes down to an argument of origins, the ageless question, where did we come from? And if people believe that UFO knots are advanced extraterrestrials scurrying about in spaceships, and that these same creatures visited the Earth in ancient days and tinkered with hominid DNA, well, then that obviously disturbs the Judeo-Christian doctrine concerning the age of the Earth and biblical creation. Satan would love people to believe that we're nothing more than an alien zoology program that continues to be under their surveillance. Of course, according to the Bible, the end times are going to be accompanied by, quote, fearful sights and great signs from heaven, end quote. The book of 2 Thessalonians even says that when the Antichrist is revealed, he is going to be accompanied by, quote, lying wonders, end quote. Maybe those verses are talking about UFOs being used to introduce the man of sin. I mean, think about it. Wouldn't the world react to the sudden arrival of an intergalactic wise man with awe and wonder?
Well, certainly they would. And maybe this deception will be part of how the demonic world brings the earth to its knees in fear and astonishment. Now, I really want you to think about this. Imagine yourself waking up one morning. You know, at first it seems like any other morning. Now you step out of your front door, intending to check the mail. But something catches your eye. Something big. Something in the air. As you look up, you quickly realize that you didn't only see one something, but an entire armada of somethings hovering in the sky. They are so close that you can see the smoothness of the metal, yet they're so quiet that if you closed your eyes, you would not know they were there at all. After the initial shock, once you begin to process what it is you're seeing, you run back into your house and turn on the news. Every channel is reporting on the same thing, and the media spin is thick and obvious. The beings piloting the objects you saw outside are claiming to be the creators of humanity, and the news is reporting it as fact. They have already sent down a representative to speak with the leaders of Earth. This representative, this intergalactic wise man, then steps forward and declares himself to have all the answers humanity is so desperate for today. Meanwhile, the entire world is reeling from the shock, economic chaos, and shaking of core belief systems caused by the appearance of these beings. And now, all of a sudden, in that moment, you realize life will never be the same again. The days of mundane tasks like going to the bank, shopping at Walmart, or even taking a family vacation were all things of the past. The life you once knew is over, and now a new, horrifying reality has taken its place. The state of collapse and miracle answers from these ETs would cause most of the world to quickly warm up to their new leader, the Antichrist, as a genuine Messiah. And the Vatican would be there to confirm the moral supremacy of our big space brother. All of which would become crucial elements of the prophecy of 2 Thessalonians 2:11 through 12. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Is that scenario what world authorities, both secular and religious, are preparing mankind for at this very time? Well, I believe we'll know the answer to that question sooner than most imagine.